She was forced by her family to marry her sister's millionaire fiancé in Coma. Shocking twist. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Have you ever felt trapped by something you didn't choose, only to find yourself in a situation you never imagined? This is the story of a young woman who was forced into a marriage she didn't want, and what happened when everything changed. Let's get started. Claire stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the delicate lace on her wedding dress. The reflection staring back at her was a woman she hardly recognized. Gone were the dreams of becoming an artist and opening her own gallery. In their place was a woman bound by duty, about to marry a man she barely knew. A man who was still unconscious in a hospital bed, his future uncertain, his past unknown. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on her chest. She glanced at the clock on the wall, the minutes ticking away faster than she could breathe. The wedding was only hours away, and she had no choice but to go through with it. Her family had made it clear this was the only option. If she refused, there would be consequences far worse than anything she could imagine. Claire had always been the responsible one, the one who kept her head down and did what was expected of her. But now, standing in the silent room, she wondered just how much of her life she was willing to give up for the sake of family obligations. The days after the wedding felt like a blur to Claire. Every morning, she woke up with the same heavy feeling in her chest, knowing she was living a life that wasn't hers. The mansion felt colder than ever. The once warm and welcoming walls now felt like they were closing in on her. James was still in the hospital, still in a coma, and she was left to navigate this new life she hadn't chosen. Every time she looked around, everything reminded her of her sister Sarah, who should have been the one here, living this life. Every corner of the house, every detail, from the photos on the walls to the elegant furniture, was a reminder of Sarah's life before the accident. Claire had spent the past week trying to adjust to this strange new reality, but she couldn't help but feel like an imposter. The servants were kind but distant, treating her with the same polite indifference they had shown Sarah. The family, too, had been distant. Her parents were focused on maintaining appearances and making sure everything was running smoothly for when James woke up. As Claire walked through the grand hallways of the mansion, she couldn't help but feel out of place. She didn't belong here, and it was becoming painfully clear every day that she was not the woman James was supposed to marry. Claire's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone buzzing in her pocket. It was a message from her mother. The doctors say James is showing signs of improvement. He's waking up. Claire's heart skipped a beat. After days of uncertainty, the moment they had all been waiting for had finally arrived. She felt a mix of fear and anticipation rush through her, but more than anything, she felt guilty. Was she really the one James was supposed to wake up to? Would he be disappointed to find out that it wasn't Sarah at his side? The hospital room was quiet when Claire arrived, the usual beeping of machines and the soft hum of the air conditioning filling the space. James lay there, pale and still, his chest rising and falling with each slow breath. The nurse who had been monitoring him smiled at Claire as she entered. "He's showing progress," the nurse said softly. "He's been responsive to sound, so feel free to talk to him." Claire walked over to his bedside and hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say. What do you say to a man who is waking up from a coma, not knowing what happened, and finding out that the woman he was supposed to marry was not his fiancée but her sister? She took a deep breath and spoke softly. "James, it's me, Claire," she said, her voice shaky. "I know you must be confused, but I'm here for you. I promised Sarah I would take care of you." She paused, unsure of what to say next. "I don't know if you can hear me, but I just wanted you to know that I'm here, and I'll do my best to help you through this." There was no immediate response. The machines continued their rhythmic beeping, and Claire felt the weight of the silence settle around her. She had no idea how long she sat there, her hand resting gently on his. But then, something happened. His fingers twitched. At first, Claire thought she had imagined it, but then, his hand moved again. It was faint, but it was real. Claire's breath caught in her throat as she watched James's hand shift slightly. His eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. The bright light from the room made him squint, and for a moment he looked confused. His eyes scanned the room, finally landing on Claire. He blinked, his brow furrowing. "Claire?" he whispered, his voice hoarse and weak. Claire's heart raced. She wasn't sure if he was truly awake, but hearing him speak her name sent a wave of relief through her. She squeezed his hand gently. "Yes, James. It's me," she said, her voice trembling. "How do you feel?" James blinked again, as if trying to process everything. "What happened? Where am I?" Claire took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had prepared for this moment, but it was harder than she had imagined. "You were in an accident," she said softly. "You've been in a coma for several weeks." He looked at her, his expression blank, trying to piece together the fragments of his memory. "Sarah, where's Sarah?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion. Claire felt a lump form in her throat. How was she supposed to explain this? She hadn't expected him to wake up so soon, let alone ask about Sarah. "James, I'm so sorry," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah, she's in the hospital too, but she's not awake." James's eyes widened with shock, his hand tightening around hers. "What do you mean? She's not awake?" Claire nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "No, James. She's been in a coma, just like you. And I'm here in her place." For a moment, there was silence. James looked at her, his confusion deepening. He tried to sit up, but his body was too weak. Claire gently helped him adjust, her heart breaking as she saw the confusion and pain in his eyes. Why did you do this?" he asked quietly, his voice full of disbelief. Claire swallowed hard, not knowing how to answer. "I promised Sarah," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I promised her I would take care of you." James looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "I never wanted this," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I never wanted you to be in this position." Claire squeezed his hand, her own tears falling silently. "I know," she whispered back. "But I'm here now, and we'll get through this together. I promise." James nodded slowly, the weight of the situation settling in. Neither of them knew what the future held, but one thing was certain: they had a long road ahead, and things would never be the same. As the days passed, James's recovery progressed slowly but steadily. Claire stayed by his side, her heart aching as she watched him struggle to remember the details of his life, of the world he once knew. Every morning she would help him sit up, bring him his meals, and assist him with his physical therapy. Each moment felt like a step toward normalcy, but the weight of the situation was never far from her mind. She was still living in her sister's shadow, and now James was awake. But the bond between them felt distant and uncertain. She had promised Sarah she would take care of him, but Claire had no idea how to navigate this strange new reality. James was kind, but there was still a part of him that seemed distant, like he didn't fully recognize her as the woman he was supposed to marry. She had hoped that as he regained his memory, he would remember their connection, but that wasn't happening as quickly as she had expected. One evening, after a long day of physical therapy, Claire found herself sitting beside James's bed, her thoughts racing. She watched him as he stared out the window, lost in thought. The evening sun bathed the room in a soft golden glow, but the silence between them felt heavy, filled with unspoken words. Claire couldn't help but wonder if James would ever truly see her for who she was, or if she would always be the substitute, the woman who was only here because of an accident that had taken her sister's place. James turned to her, his voice breaking through her thoughts. "Claire," he said softly, his gaze lingering on her face. "I need to ask you something." Claire's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't been prepared for a question like this. She met his gaze, trying to steady her breath. "Of course," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "What's on your mind?" James hesitated for a moment, his eyes searching hers for something. "How long have I been in the hospital?" he asked, his voice tinged with a hint of confusion. Claire felt a lump form in her throat as she tried to find the right words. "You've been here for several weeks," she said softly. "You were in a coma for most of that time." James frowned, trying to make sense of the information. "And what about Sarah?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "What happened to her?" Claire paused, the truth weighing heavily on her chest. She had avoided telling him everything, hoping that he would remember on his own. But now, it seemed like the right time to come clean. "Sarah is still in a coma," Claire said quietly. "She's been in the hospital just like you. But she hasn't woken up." James's eyes widened in shock, his expression full of confusion and concern. "I don't understand," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "How is that possible? I was supposed to marry her, not you." Claire felt a pang in her heart as his words hit her like a punch to the gut. She had been dreading this moment, the moment when he would realize that she wasn't the woman he had planned to marry. "I know this is hard to understand," Claire said, her voice trembling. "But I'm here now because I promised Sarah I would take care of you." James looked at her, his expression softening for a moment. "But why?" he asked, his voice full of uncertainty. "Why are you doing this? Why did you marry me?" Claire swallowed hard, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. "Because I had no choice," she said, her voice barely audible. "I had to do this for my family, for Sarah. I didn't want to marry you, James. I didn't even know you. But I did it because I promised her, because I knew it was the only way to keep everything from falling apart." James's gaze softened as he reached for her hand, his grip gentle but firm. "I never asked you to do this," he said quietly, his voice filled with regret. "You didn't have to marry me, Claire. I wish you hadn't." Claire felt a tear slip down her cheek as she looked at him. "I know," she whispered, "but I did it anyway. And now, I don't know what to do." James looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing his words carefully. "I don't know what to do either," he said softly. "I'm confused, Claire. I don't remember you. I don't remember what we were supposed to be, and I don't even know if I can trust my own feelings." Claire nodded, understanding the depth of his confusion. She had been living in a fog too, unsure of what to do next. The future was uncertain, and neither of them knew what would happen when they finally figured everything out. But there was one thing Claire knew for sure. She couldn't keep pretending. She couldn't keep living a life that wasn't hers. And neither could James. The truth was out now, and it would take time to heal, to rebuild their relationship, whatever it might look like. But for the first time since everything had started, Claire felt a small glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way forward, together. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between Claire and James remained thick in the air. They were no longer strangers, but they weren't a married couple either. They were two people, thrown together by fate, trying to navigate a life neither of them had chosen. Claire spent her days helping James with his recovery, but her heart was heavy with uncertainty. She still didn't know where she fit into his world, or where he fit into hers. James had moments of clarity, but there were also days when he seemed lost, as if the world around him was moving too fast for him to catch up. He often looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and confusion, unsure of how to feel, what to say, or even who he really was anymore. One afternoon, as Claire was preparing lunch for the two of them, she heard a soft knock at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone, and as she opened it, she found her mother standing there, her expression unreadable. "Mom," Claire said, her voice a little shaky, "what are you doing here?" Her mother stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room before landing on Claire. "I came to check on you," she said quietly. "And James." Claire's heart sank. She knew what was coming. Her mother had never been one for subtlety. "You're still married to him, aren't you?" her mother asked, her voice cool and detached. "You're still playing the part, pretending like everything's fine." Claire took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "It's not like that, Mom," she said, her voice steady but firm. "James is recovering. He's not the same man he was before the accident." Her mother raised an eyebrow. "And what does that mean for you? You're still stuck here, aren't you? Still pretending to be Sarah's replacement, still living in her shadow." Claire's pulse quickened, but she kept her composure. "I'm not replacing Sarah," she said quietly, her voice tinged with frustration. "I'm here because I promised her I would take care of him, and I'm doing the best I can." Her mother sighed, crossing her arms over her chest. "You don't have to do this, Claire," she said, her tone softening slightly. "You don't have to live this life. You can walk away. You can leave all of this behind and go after your dreams." Claire shook her head, her throat tightening. "It's not that simple," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't just walk away. I made a promise." Her mother looked at her for a long moment before speaking again, her voice gentler now. "I know you feel obligated, but sometimes we have to let go of the things that hold us back." Claire wanted to argue, to tell her mother that this wasn't just about obligation, but about love and family. But she couldn't find the words. She wasn't even sure if she believed it herself anymore. "I just don't know what to do anymore," Claire whispered, her eyes welling with tears. Her mother stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to have all the answers right now, sweetheart," she said softly. "Just take it one day at a time." Claire nodded, wiping away the tears that had started to fall. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in weeks she felt like she could breathe again. Her mother left soon after, and Claire returned to the kitchen, her thoughts still swirling. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't keep living this way. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. She needed to make a choice. But what choice would she make? That night, after dinner, Claire found herself sitting on the balcony, staring out at the stars. James had gone to bed early, exhausted from the day's therapy. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that felt almost suffocating. Claire leaned back in the chair, letting the cool night air wash over her. She had never felt more alone, even though she was surrounded by people. She missed her old life, the life she had before all of this, before the wedding, before the accident, before the lies. She missed the freedom to choose her own path, to follow her own dreams. But now, she was trapped in a life that wasn't hers, and she wasn't sure how to get out. A part of her knew she couldn't walk away from James. He needed her. But a bigger part of her knew she needed to find herself again, to reclaim the life that had been stolen from her. She couldn't keep living in the shadow of someone else's life. She had to find her own way, no matter how difficult that might be. The next morning, Claire woke up with a new sense of purpose. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she had to start making decisions for herself. As she helped James with his morning exercises, she found herself thinking about what she wanted, what she needed. She couldn't keep putting everyone else's needs above her own. She had to find a way to be true to herself. But as the day went on, Claire realized that the biggest obstacle standing in her way wasn't James or her family. It was herself. She had to let go of the guilt, the obligation, and the fear of disappointing others. She had to trust herself, trust that she could make the right decisions. And for the first time in a long time, Claire felt a spark of hope. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she was ready to start figuring them out. The next few weeks were a turning point for Claire. Each day, she made small decisions that were slowly pulling her away from the life she had been forced into. It wasn't easy. Every time she looked at James, a part of her still felt the weight of her promise to her sister. But as she spent more time with him, Claire realized that she had been so focused on doing the right thing for everyone else that she had forgotten to think about what was right for her. James, too, was struggling with his own confusion. He was no longer the man he used to be. The accident had not only taken his memories but also his sense of identity. He often stared at Claire with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow, still trying to reconcile the fact that the woman he had intended to marry was no longer by his side. Claire could see it in his eyes. He wanted to remember, to understand what had happened, but he couldn't. And that was the hardest part for her. She had promised to help him heal, but she had no idea how to heal herself. One evening, as the sun was setting, Claire found herself alone in the garden, surrounded by the scent of roses and the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. She needed some space to think, to clear her mind. Her mother's visit had left her shaken. It was as though her mother had opened up a floodgate of doubts and fears that Claire had been trying to suppress. But now, the weight of her own desires and dreams were impossible to ignore. Claire sat on a stone bench, looking up at the sky, wondering if it was too late to change her path. Just then, James stepped into the garden. His face looked tired, but there was something in his eyes that made Claire's heart flutter. He had been recovering slowly, but the progress was uneven. Some days, he seemed like his old self, and other days, he seemed lost in a world of confusion. He approached Claire cautiously, as if unsure of what to say. "I thought I'd find you here," he said, his voice soft but steady. Claire smiled faintly. "Just needed some fresh air," she replied. "It's been a lot, hasn't it?" James nodded, sitting down beside her. "I don't know what's real anymore," he said, his voice laced with frustration. "One minute, I feel like I'm remembering everything, and the next, it's all gone. And you've been so kind to me, but I don't know how to make sense of it." Claire turned to face him, her heart aching for him. She reached out and placed a hand on his. "James, I know this is hard," she said gently, "but I'm here for you, and I think, maybe, we can figure this out together." James looked at her, his eyes searching hers, as if trying to find the answers he so desperately needed. "I don't want you to feel trapped, Claire," he said, his voice quiet but filled with sincerity. "You don't owe me anything. You didn't sign up for this. I can't imagine what it's like for you." Claire felt a wave of emotion rush through her. She had spent so much time feeling guilty, feeling like she was doing the right thing for everyone else, but she had never truly stopped to consider what James needed, or what she needed. "I'm not trapped, James," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I'm here because I want to be. I promised Sarah that I would help you, and I'm doing the best I can. But that doesn't mean I don't have my own life to live, too." James nodded slowly, his expression softening. "I know," he said, I've been thinking a lot about what you've said. I don't want to keep you from your dreams. I can't be the one to hold you back." For the first time in weeks, Claire felt a sense of clarity. It wasn't about obligation anymore. It wasn't about what she had promised her family or what she had promised Sarah. It was about finding her own path again, and it was about time. She could still care for James, still help him through his recovery, but she didn't have to give up her own happiness in the process. "James," Claire said softly, her voice steady now, "I think we both need to figure out what we want, and I think we can help each other do that. But we have to be honest with ourselves and with each other. I'm ready to live my life, and I want you to do the same. I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not." James looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. Hope. "You're right," he said quietly. "Maybe we both need to find our way back to who we really are. And maybe we can do that together." Claire smiled, the tension in her chest easing for the first time in a long while. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that this was the beginning of something new. It was time for both of them to heal, to move forward, and to live the lives they were meant to live. And maybe, just maybe, they would find their way to each other in the process. As the weeks passed, Claire and James began to carve out a new reality, one that was uncertain but filled with the possibility of change. Claire spent more time focusing on herself, something she hadn't done in so long. She returned to her art, something she had set aside for years, and found herself sketching again. The images came easily, flowing from her hands as if the canvas had been waiting for her all along. The house, once a reminder of everything she had lost, now felt like a space where she could rediscover who she was. It wasn't perfect, and she wasn't sure what her future held, but for the first time in a long time, Claire felt like she was reclaiming her life. James, too, was slowly regaining his confidence. His recovery, though slow, was progressing. He started speaking more openly about his fears and doubts, things he had kept hidden even before the accident. For Claire, this was a breakthrough. She had seen him struggle with the confusion of not remembering his past, but now he was starting to take control of his present, something Claire admired deeply. One afternoon, as Claire sat in the living room working on a painting, she heard James's voice call from the hallway. "Claire, can we talk?" His tone was different, more determined. She set down her brush and walked toward him, unsure of what to expect. When she entered the room, James was standing by the window, looking out at the garden. The sunlight bathed his face, casting a warm glow, but there was a seriousness to him that Claire hadn't seen in a while. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he began, his back still to her. "About everything. About us. About my future." Claire's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know where this conversation would lead, but she knew it was a crucial moment. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. James turned to face her, his expression calm but his eyes intense. "I know I've been confused. I know I've been trying to find my place in a world that feels like it's falling apart. But I've come to realize something. You didn't just step in because you had to. You're here because you care, because you want to help, but also because you see something in me that I didn't even see in myself." Claire felt a lump in her throat as he spoke. She wasn't used to hearing him be so open, so vulnerable. "James," she said softly, stepping closer, "I care about you, but this hasn't been easy for either of us. I didn't want to be in this position, but I'm trying to do the best I can." James nodded, his gaze softening. "I know, Claire, I know, and that's why I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about the future, about my life, and I can't keep hiding from the truth. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I want to try. I want to try to be the man I was before all of this happened." Claire's heart raced as she processed his words. She had always known that James was capable of more, but hearing him say it out loud made her believe it more than ever. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm saying that I want to rebuild my life," he replied, his voice firm with conviction. "I want to find my purpose again. I want to make things right, not just for me, but for you too. You've been here for me when I didn't even deserve it, and I owe you more than I can ever explain." Claire stood still, trying to process the magnitude of what he was saying. She had spent so much time taking care of him, holding on to the responsibility of being there for him, but now James was offering her something she hadn't expected, an opportunity to rebuild, together. "James," she said, her voice quiet but filled with emotion, "I've been so focused on doing the right thing by everyone else, but I forgot what I really wanted. I forgot that I deserve a future too." James stepped closer to her, his gaze unwavering. We both deserve a future, Claire. And it's not just about the past or the promises we made. It's about what we can build together moving forward. The room was silent for a moment as Claire took in his words. She had always known that life with James would never be easy, but this was different. They were both choosing to move forward, not out of obligation, but because they truly wanted to try. Claire felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had been holding on to so much fear and guilt, but now she saw a glimpse of something new, a chance to start fresh, to find happiness again. I don't know what the future holds, she said, her voice steady now. But I know that we can figure it out, together. James smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes, the first real smile she had seen in weeks. Together, he echoed, his voice soft but sure. And for the first time in a long time, Claire felt a spark of hope. It wasn't just about healing James anymore. It was about healing herself, and about the possibility of a future they could create together. The road ahead would be difficult, but at least now, they were walking it side by side. The weeks that followed were transformative for both Claire and James. They had started to rebuild their lives, not just out of obligation, but because they truly wanted to. Claire found herself slowly letting go of the guilt that had weighed so heavily on her for so long. She began to focus more on her own dreams, rediscovering her love for art, and even enrolling in an art class at a local studio. For the first time in years, she felt like she was reconnecting with the person she had been before all of this. James, on the other hand, was steadily regaining his confidence. His recovery was still a work in progress, but he was no longer the man who had been lost in a fog of confusion and frustration. He was starting to find purpose again. He resumed work at his company, though he took a more hands-on approach, not wanting to dive back into his old life too quickly. Both Claire and James had come to realize that there was no rushing the healing process. It had to happen naturally, step by step, with patience and understanding. One evening, after a long day of work and therapy, Claire found herself sitting on the porch, gazing out at the horizon. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange. It was a moment of peace, one that felt rare in the whirlwind of emotions and changes they had both experienced. James came outside, holding 2 cups of tea, and sat down beside her. They didn't speak for a while, just enjoying the stillness of the moment. "I've been thinking," James said, breaking the silence, "about everything we've been through, and I realize that this isn't just about recovering from the accident. It's about finding out who we really are now, after everything." Claire turned to him, her heart swelling with affection. "I know what you mean," she said softly. "I've spent so much of my life trying to meet other people's expectations that I forgot what it felt like to live for myself. But I'm starting to remember. And it feels good, James. It feels like I can breathe again." James looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I think I'm finally starting to understand that too. I was so caught up in the idea of being a successful businessman, but I never stopped to think about what really mattered to me, what truly made me happy, and now I want to live a life that's true to me." Claire smiled at him, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in a long time, she felt like they were both on the same path, walking together. "We've both changed, haven't we?" she said, her voice filled with quiet wonder. "Not just because of the accident, but because we've had to face ourselves, our fears, and our regrets, and we're still standing." James nodded. "I think that's what matters," he said. "Not the mistakes we've made, or the things we've lost, but the fact that we're still here. And we have the chance to make things right, together." The air was cooler now, the first hint of evening chill setting in. Claire wrapped her arms around herself, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. "Together," she whispered, as if to herself. They sat in silence for a while longer, each lost in their own thoughts, but knowing, deep down, that they had come a long way. They weren't the same people who had met each other under the most impossible circumstances. They were different now, stronger, wiser, and more in tune with who they were and what they wanted. Claire knew that their journey wasn't over. They still had a long road ahead, full of challenges and uncertainties, but they were no longer afraid of what that road might hold. They were ready to face it together. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, Claire reached for James's hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "I don't know what the future holds," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination, "but I know we're going to face it, no matter what, side by side." James squeezed her hand gently. "Side by side," he echoed, his voice steady and confident. And in that moment, as they sat together under the vast starry sky, Claire realized that, no matter what had happened in the past, they had found something worth fighting for each other. Months passed, and the changes in both Claire and James were undeniable. They had come a long way from the strangers forced together by circumstance, but now they were two people building a future together, no longer weighed down by the past. Claire had found her passion again, working on her art, and even showcasing her work at a local gallery. It was a small victory, but it was hers, and that was all that mattered. James, too, had found a new purpose. He had stepped back from his hectic business life, focusing on the things that truly mattered to him: his health, his relationships, and most importantly, his connection with Claire. They had learned to take life one step at a time, letting go of the need for control and embracing the beauty of the present. It was a slow, steady process, but they were both happier than they had been in a long time. One evening, as they sat in the living room of their home, a place that now felt like theirs, James turned to Claire with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice calm and steady, "about everything we've been through, about how far we've come." Claire smiled, setting down the book she had been reading. "It feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?" she said softly, her voice filled with reflection. James nodded, his gaze softening. "It does. And I think we've learned that life doesn't always go the way we plan, but that doesn't mean it can't still be beautiful." Claire's heart swelled at his words. It wasn't just the fact that James had learned to find peace in his own life, but that he saw beauty in their shared journey, in all the ups and downs they had faced together. "I never thought we would end up here," she said, her voice tinged with a mixture of wonder and contentment. "But I'm glad we did." James reached out and took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "Me too," he said, his voice steady. "I'm glad we didn't give up on each other." Claire smiled softly, feeling the weight of everything they had been through lifting off her shoulders. "I don't think we ever really gave up," she said quietly. "We just needed to find our way back to each other." James smiled back at her, his eyes filled with sincerity. "And now that we have, I want to make sure we never lose it again." Claire's heart fluttered at his words. There was something in his voice, something that made her believe in their future more than she ever had before. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity. James took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers. "I know it's been a long road, but I don't want to wait any longer. Claire, will you marry me? For real this time, no obligations, no promises to anyone else, just you and me, building our future together." Claire's breath caught in her throat, her heart racing as she looked into his eyes. She hadn't expected this, not now, not after everything they had been through, but as she stared at him, she realized it was exactly what she had always wanted. "Yes," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." James's face lit up with a smile, the kind of smile that made Claire feel like the luckiest person in the world. "You mean it?" he asked, his voice full of disbelief and joy. Claire nodded, her eyes shining with tears. "I mean it. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, James. I'm ready for us to build the future we've always dreamed of." James pulled her into a tight embrace, his arms wrapping around her as if he never wanted to let go. "I love you, Claire," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you too," she replied softly, her heart swelling with happiness. In that moment, everything felt right. They had found their way back to each other, not because they were perfect, but because they were willing to fight for their love, to build a life that was truly theirs. As they stood together in their home, their future felt full of possibilities, and for the first time in a long time, they both believed in the promise of tomorrow. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but they knew that as long as they had each other, they could face anything. And with that, they knew they were ready for the next chapter of their journey, hand in hand, with love in their hearts and hope for the future.